What's up, everybody? Here we are with another expert lecture with a dear friend and a legendary, iconic Tasha Blank, who has moved me and danced me and inspired me in the dance floors of New York City for a while. I remember pulling up to the Get Down and looking up at the DJ booth and being like, "Oh my God, God is real." And it's this woman, and she will lift you and move you and inspire you. And I would dance for 2 hours sober, and I would walk out of there being like, "Okay, I can take on the world. Like my problems are not that deep. It's not that big of a deal. I can do it." So thank you for being here. Thank you for having done all this work and showing up to so many people around the world through the years. Thank you. Thank you.
You're so welcome. It's such a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, love. Okay, so let's start at the top. Holding space in dance facilitation. What are the best practices for creating a safe, non-judgmental space that allows participants to express themselves fully?
Such a juicy one. And I think it's probably the most important. I always say safety comes first. You can't have transformation if you don't establish safety, which is not to say that you can create a truly safe space. We can't, because the world is not a safe place, but we can support folks finding a feeling of safety in themselves. And that accessing that is what enables them to go deeper into their own practice. So the things that can really support that happening, it depends on what kind of space you want to create and what your intentions are. So everything is always going to be super custom for exactly what you want to do. And I always encourage people to get really clear on why they're bringing people together, what they want those folks to feel, what they want to happen, and then kind of backtrack of like, what do I need to put in place for that to happen? So if I want to throw a fun, good time party where it's a good vibe, but nobody's having a big catharsis or crying or anything like that. I don't have to make a very strong container. I might have to have some rules and guidelines. I might have to set expectations with how I market it, and be clear about what's allowed, what's not allowed. But that kind of space doesn't need as much nurturing. If we want to create a space where we really want folks to go deep and access those parts of themselves that they've buried, that they've been afraid to touch, that they've been afraid to get connected with, we have to create a really strong container. And those containers, it's not very sexy or magical like what we have to do. We have to have really clear rules and guidelines, and for those to be set up in the marketing, in the invitation, in the event page, in how people are greeted at the door and the reminders they get when they come in. Same goes with the permission that we give and the expectations we set around how we want folks to bring themselves. So they're getting that signal and that message from the first time they hear about what you're doing, that, oh, all of me is going to be welcome here. I'm going to this to have a different kind of experience than I'm used to having in my day-to-day life. I'm going here to explore the unknown. There's so much we can do in the way that we set up and talk about our event, or our offering beforehand, that lays the groundwork for them to arrive kind of primed to step into that. Depending on the size of the group, you're definitely going to want to have helpers. And especially if you're DJing or you're teaching or you're the facilitator, you can't be everywhere in the room. And you also probably can't be the one to enforce guidelines or boundaries or things that come up around safety. Because even if you create a really intentional space and everybody in the room has nothing but the best intentions, somebody's still going to get triggered. Like safe space, creating safer spaces doesn't mean that we're going to not trigger you. So how do we move that, and what resources are available for people who get triggered or who do have an actual boundary that gets crossed. Like, do they know who to go to if they're having a problem? So whether it's your door people or having greeters at the door in addition to your door people, at my parties, I have something called Ground Force, which is a crew. It's like our safer space crew, and they have light up armbands. So, and we always announce that they're there. We let people know when they're coming in that Ground Force is here to support you, and you can look out for them. And then also in the middle, when I do a little moment of silence and kind of reorientation of like what we're doing and what are the ground rules. And by the way, there's this group of folks who, if you need anything, look out for those armbands. So those are like the biggest things. I personally, at my parties that I do in clubs, there is a bar. You can get a drink. A lot of people mistakenly think it's a sober event because we have no drinks on the dance floor, and the intention of the event is really about dancing. So you could go and like not even realize people are drinking. And that sets it up to be this really nice middle ground. But if you're having a sober dance, you know, you want that to be really clear. Like, not only are we not serving alcohol here, but please arrive sober. You know, and that's what that setup has to do. Like, if they get there and they took a little some before they walked in, and then you're delivering the ground rules at the beginning for the first time, and you're like, by the way, be sober, and they're already not sober, it's too late. But if you're really clear in how you set it up and what the expectations are, you can avoid that.
I love this. Thank you so much. And what's like one thing that, regardless of it's a playful party or like a big stage or like an intimate dance ritual, like what's one thing that never goes unsaid when it comes to creating this safe space for people to express themselves fully?
Mm-hmm. The biggest thing that has to happen is respecting our own bodies and the bodies of everyone else. And so that includes consent education, and not everybody knows about how consent works. And, you know, at this event, do you need to get verbal consent, or is nonverbal consent okay? And having a conversation about like, how are we communicating with each other? So every time we gather people to have a ritual experience, we're creating a temporary autonomous zone where the rules and the norms and the cultural norms we're creating are different from the norms out in the default world. And so you have this opportunity to create whatever kind of culture that you want. And it does have to be said explicitly, because otherwise folks are going to bring their expectations, their assumptions from their day-to-day life and not realize what are the rules and the norms. Another thing that really helps is having whether, you know, if you're just starting something, it could be a group of your friends or that Ground Force type crew where you're really bringing these people in as your helpers to help hold the vibe and kind of emanate what the culture is you want to create. And then the more you do, the more offerings you do, and the more community you build, the more people come, the more that culture starts to build inside of your spaces. And that kind of central circle of the people who come every time and who get it and they've heard the rules a million times, they start to emanate it. And also, you know, they might see somebody. So for my events, there's no phones allowed. You got to keep it turned off and in your pocket. So even somebody who's not hired or not officially on the team, if they're like a super regular and they come to all of these parties and they feel really bought in and they really get it, they might go over to that person and tap them on the shoulder. Hey, you know, put that away, be here now kind of vibe. So I think consent is definitely a huge one, especially if you're creating embodied spaces where it's about the body, and that can come with a lot of baggage, and people have habits and they make assumptions about what's okay and what's not okay. So being really explicit about that, super important.
Thank you, babe. That was beautiful. Now, breaking through inhibition, what techniques or prompts can be used to help people release self-consciousness and move with greater freedom?
Such a good one. So of course, this comes after establishing safety. If people don't feel safe, they're never inside of themselves. They're never going to have a breakthrough. They're never going to drop their inhibitions. So prompts that I really love are ones that direct us back to the body, that are actually pretty simple. Like, I think especially folks who are starting out as facilitators, they have become facilitators because they've had these incredibly profound experiences, right? It's only a very profound experience that's going to put you on that path, be like, I want to deliver this to other people. And there can be a temptation to be really profound in what you say. And like, I was more like that at the beginning of when I was on the mic and I was DJing the first few years. I would be more poetic and a little more intellectual and a little more rehearsed around what I was saying. But then the fact of the matter was, 2 minutes later, nobody would remember what I said. They might have thought I was cool in the moment, but did it actually direct them back to their bodies? I don't know. So the most profound thing in the room is inside of the body. And the most profound experience we're going to have is inside of our body. So it's not about profound words. It's about just redirecting attention to the place where the profundity exists, which is inside. It's so much more effective, comparing a statement like, all right, and now feel like you're dancing with the moon and feel like the cosmos is all around you. Like, that's kind of cool. And like, that's kind of a nice idea. But what if I say, all right, now relax the back of your tongue and feel the backs of your knees and plant your feet. Can you feel the center of the earth with your feet? These really physical, palpable, concrete prompts that just redirect that attention, which is always going up and out, always into the head, always into comparison, whether it's judging somebody out there or judging myself. Like, the mind is always going to be doing that. So it's like, what can I say to bring us back?
This is so good. I'm so glad you nailed that. The profundity is in the body. It doesn't need to be in your words. You don't need to sound
That's right.
poetic
That's right.
and mystical, because it's so true. You may say something really beautiful and poetic and mystical, and you may be like, oh my God, it was gag. And then people are still, now they're looping about that. They're not here where they should be in order for emotional release and healing to take place. I thank you for emphasizing that, because I feel like there's this need to look and sound special. So everyone, take it from a pro here. Tasha Blank has been doing this with thousands of people. Her events are much larger than a lot of the things that we will be doing, or because of how much guidance it's required in the method. But listening to her coming from this massive stage into our little stages, it's really important to remember that. So thank you.
And there's a couple more things about guiding folks into dropping their inhibitions. I'm always speaking to either their hearts, like their inner voices, their inner children, like the critic, or I'm speaking to their body. And so when I'm speaking to the body, there's cues that I'm like, it's a little bit hard to explain because it is an embodied instinctual thing that happens that like turns on when I start to facilitate, where I'm giving different kinds of prompts if I'm speaking to the body. And then there's times when I speak to the mind, like, for example, if I know I'm going to take people into a more like the peak of the night, I will speak to the resistance and I will say, if there's any part of you that is still holding on, if there's any part of you that has not let go yet, if you came here tonight to let go of something, this is your moment. And it never fails. It never fails to give them that reminder of like, don't wait. This is the time. Like, this is your time out of all the times to let this go and to explore what's here.
God, this is so good. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. This is so generous of you, Tasha. Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I've got two more. Hopefully we can tackle them. The neuroscience of dance. Can you share any insights on how dance affects the brain and the nervous system, particularly in relation to releasing our old wounds, aka trauma?
Mhm. So there's all kinds of things that happen in the brain when we dance, and they're worth a Google. But you like if you're really interested in that, you can Google it. But knowing that music and movement together activate all of these things, they release dopamine, they release serotonin, they give us feelings of euphoria. And also doing it in a crowd, if we're feeling comfortable and safe, releases oxytocin. It's like bathing ourselves in all these really, really great neurotransmitters. So it's also that much more of a kind of space where you can have transformation because you've created, it's like, people do psychedelic journeys, or they use certain substances to unlock trauma. It's like, these are substances that you can use to naturally, it's like your own innate pharmacy to create the conditions for moving through some more difficult stuff. Something that I'm really passionate about is how the nervous system works and how we can work with it as facilitators and DJs, and how we work with music, because your nervous system is your body. Like, your nervous system lives in your body. Your nervous system controls everything you do. It controls how you interpret reality. It determines what you detect as a threat and what you detect as safe. So our nervous systems it's the motherboard. It's like central HQ of our entire being. And music and movement are one of the most effective and direct ways to modulate our nervous system to create more capacity. Let me see if I can break this down in a way that's succinct. The more experiences we have that we can't process fully, which I kind of define that as trauma. Trauma is not an event, it's how our body doesn't process an event, and then that threat response gets stuck, and keeps us in a loop where we're like constantly interpreting everything as a threat, and we can become hypervigilant, and we can become closed off, and we can get shut down depending on where in our nervous system it's triggering us. There's so much in our society and the way that we're living our lives that contributes to us being stuck, and to lots and lots of information and data getting stuck and unprocessed in us. So, and what that does is it decreases our capacity to be with life and to feel and to process other things. So it's this sort of like vicious cycle that starts to happen. And working with movement practices is a really beautiful way to meet that nervous system where it's at. We don't try to blast them open right away, right? That would probably recreate the threat response. It would probably re-traumatize if we're just, if we've got like a tight little ball that's in a little turtle in its shell and it's all defended, and we're like, break open, like just break open, it's just going to get more defended. But if we can meet that system where it's at, and create a little bit of safety around it so that it can start to open, then we can use music to titrate open into expansion, adding a little bit more intensity and a little more breath and a little more space so that we can feel more, and then kind of taking it back in so that openness gets integrated. We reestablish safety, and then we create more capacity to open a little more. So my sets, it's not just like we're going up and up and up and up until we peak and then go back down. It's like we're kind of going like this. Like we go up a little, we go back down. We go up a little, we go back down. But we don't go all the way back down, because we're sort of on this upward trajectory where the body, if we're doing it in a way that maintains that sense of safety and gets to integrate that openness without it becoming threatening. Because remember, these things that we've closed off, there's a reason we closed off to them. There's a reason we didn't want to feel them. There's a reason there wasn't room for them. So as we open, we want to be like continually reestablishing that this is safe. This, you're welcome to feel this. Like, yes, embracing these sensations, and then, okay, let's revel in a little pleasure, alternating intensity and pleasure. And ultimately, that makes space for release. It makes space for discharge. It makes space for, that time that our body really wanted to fight something, really wanted to push something away, but couldn't, and got stuck and got frozen. Like, they may find that, oh, as things open up on the dance floor and in my embodiment practice, like suddenly I want to do a lot of this. Like, I really want to let that go. And when we can actually allow the body to do what it never got to do, it resolves those loops that got interrupted. And then we want to do aftercare. So with my sets, there's always that sort of like big release. And then afterwards, I'm not bringing them down the same way I brought them up, because their nervous systems are totally changed. We've dropped so much, like we're so much more open. There's so much more expansion. There's so much more ability to feel. So I use different music that's aimed at connection, that's like nourishing and integrating that sense of wholeness and connection with the room, with ourselves. It's like we're in a totally different territory than we were when we started.
Holy shit, that was so, again, how generous of you. Oh my goddess. May the karma be tenfold in return for your generosity, because this is so spectacular. This ties into my very last question, which you've already started to answer, but just give us just a tiny little bit more about that, because you said we don't go up and sort of plateau for a moment, and up and stay, like these restful peaks, up and rest for a moment there until, and I love what you said, Tasha, about the way we went up is not the way we come down. The music of the coming down is about connection. So maybe as I'm listening and interpreting this, maybe, and I found this to be what I've been doing, it's will be sort of like electronic house, making our way up, and then the coming down when we're closing, it is music with lyrics and things that people could like sing out loud, and look around and see other people singing and smiling, and there's that whole thing taking place, and it's just like, ah. And then we said about beautiful chorus earlier off the record. We're talking about something that you went through with a family member, bringing music to someone who's going through a challenging physical experience, health problems. And one of the things that I've done is closing with beautiful chorus, is actually bringing one of their songs in, this joy that I have, the world then
Yes.
give it to me. And then looking
Yes.
out and seeing everyone singing, I'm like, oh shit, it's working, you know? Okay,
That's
but
right.
enough about me. The last few moments we have together, just explain to us a little bit more about what happens in Tasha's mind, body, heart, soul, spirit, the whole multiplicity of you when you are building a set, when you're creating a playlist, like the art of the playlist. Give us just a couple minutes of that, please.
Yeah. So as you know, I have an 8-month program that teaches people this art and the nervous system piece, and we really go very deep into it. It's, there's so many parts. I teach a 7-phase map for creating those experiences that I just kind of touched on a little bit. And it can be applied to anything, which is really cool. So the art of the playlist. Can you get a little more specific?
You know
Like
what I
what
think
might
will
be
be the
most
most,
helpful for you?
I think what's most helpful right now is if you just talk to us about what the program entails.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I think that's the most exciting thing. So people can like listen to this and be like, I want to do that.
Right. And it'll also give you a sense of what
Also,
goes
check out
into
Tasha's
it.
music. Also, like
Also
go
that.
to, yeah.
Yeah.
I
You
think,
listen to my sets, you'll get it.
yeah, listen to the sets. I think you really understand. So is it your SoundCloud? Is that where we can find it?
Oh yeah, hundreds of hours of music
Yeah,
on SoundCloud under Tasha
yeah,
Blank.
yeah.
And yes, so PhDJ or Powerhouse DJ School, we it's it's a big program. It's an initiation. It's like, yes, you will become better than 99% of the DJs out there, but also it's really about who you become. It's really about being able to stand in front of, whatever it is, 100, 500, 1,000 people and give them the transmission that they're safe to surrender, which happens through the music and also through your presence. And we go deeply into the nervous system. We go deeply into pleasure, into how sexual energy moves through the body, into power dynamics. I bring in 2 different pro doms to teach us about power dynamics, because the DJ and the facilitator is really a dom, and in the best possible, most healing way. And so we get to learn about what that really, like the benevolence of that role and what it can create and how to create it. Basically what it does is it enables your audience to surrender because they feel safe. We go into shadow work, into shamanic practice, into trance, and how to induce trance states, how to work with the invisible worlds, how to work with your own guides and invisible helpers to help hold that space, which I found to be completely necessary for me. Because when we hold these kinds of spaces, we're holding space for a lot of shit. Like, this is where everybody brings their stuff and where they release it. So their invisible stuff is moving. So you really want to have your invisible support there to help it move in the right way and move out, and to protect yourself as well. And we talk about community building, the very practical, like marketing, branding, community building, launching your own events. And then we do a lot about integration, and it's a huge journey. And the people who are drawn to it are astounding. You can imagine the kind of person, probably just the same as your people who are drawn to everything Sa. It's like, this program is very special. And so the people who come to it are really amazing. And that community becomes completely supportive, and it abides well after the program ends. Our graduates are amazing and they're doing awesome things. So all of that stuff is, I really tried to include kind of everything that enabled me to hold the kinds of spaces that I've been holding. So much of it wasn't about DJing. I infused all of it into the DJing. And of course, you can't DJ masterfully if you don't nail the technical stuff. And that's really important as well. So we work that really deeply as well. But so many of the things that make me an awesome DJ I didn't learn from DJs. I didn't learn from musicians. I learned them from scientists and healers and ritualists and medicine people and dominatrixes. Yeah.
Oh my God, Tasha, this has been such a joy and so full of incredible wisdom. Thank you so much. And everyone, go check out the program and go check out Tasha's SoundCloud and really like study that, and like, as if you're studying a musical Bible, so you can really learn. And as you're listening and you're feeling called to really take on the role of the DJ as well as the facilitator and work with these modalities, she's someone that I highly recommend.
Thank
So
you. Yeah,
go.
and on SoundCloud, there's a lot of different kinds of mixes. So there will be a playlist of like big parties, and then there will be a playlist of ecstatic dances. There's one of home practices. There's one of deep house yoga. So you get different flavors, different energy levels, different genres, and you can see like how, now that you've heard a little bit about the journey, the way that I think about creating that journey, you'll be like, oh, here's how she did it with a deep house set, and here's how she did it with like a high energy party set, and here's how it landed in an ecstatic dance set. It's the same map, but it's playing out in different ways depending on the context.
Oof. Damn, this is so good. Tasha, thank you so much for your generosity. This was like spectacular. Thank you so much.
I love you, and it's a pleasure, and I'm so excited that there's more folks who are going to be emanating your transmission and their transmission into the world. So I'm happy to, so happy to contribute.